legislators are starting to see that even more and more and saying, look, if we can't get family leave passed, why don't we just label it a fee and do that? They're talking about doing it with a gas fee instead of a gas tax, because they go to the voters and the voters say no time and time again at the state level. At the local level, they vote for tax increases, but they don't trust state government. And so state government trying to go around it, especially now that there's going to be budget cuts, I think this is essential time to say, look, all you have to do is convince people that that fee or tax is necessary, and people will pass it.
So you know that incredible scam that the governor and the legislature do when they don't raise your taxes, they just raise your fees. And that way you don't have to vote on it. Last one, of course, was the hospital provider tax, which they called a fee. And now it costs you $800 million a year that you never got to vote on, even though the Taxpayer Bill of Rights says you should. This man right here wants to do something about it. Michael Fields from Colorado Rising Action. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be on with you, John.
All right, so we're both working on initiatives to get onto this fall's ballot. Mm-hmm. Tell me about yours.
So ours, basically, with the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, as you said, you're able to vote on tax increases or bond increases, and this has been going on since 1992 when it was passed. But the courts have allowed the legislature to go around this and say, you know what, if you label something a fee, it's not a tax increase, and basically all you have to do is set up a different bank account and say, you know what, this is now an enterprise, they call it, that you can go around and not ask voters for any approval on it. And so what we wanted to do was say, look, big fees, $100 million or more over the first 5 years, have to go to voter approval, so they can't get around this. You mentioned the hospital provider fee, car registration fees. They talked about
faster fee, yep. The mill levy freeze, the growth dividend. It keeps going and going and going. And just for those who might not know the history, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights is really clear. If you raise taxes, you have to have a vote. But you might not know the history, which was when we tried to pass it in 1990, fees were included, saying, well, if there's a fee, you have to vote on that too. And they screamed, oh, so the library needs to raise the book fee by a nickel when it's overdue. And now we've got to go to a vote. And so I think Doug Bruce changed that part. But then the Supreme Court in the mill levy freeze said, anything the legislature just labels a fee is now a fee.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really
blew
brilliant.
A hole into Tabor, and legislators are starting to see that even more and more and saying, look, if we can't get family leave passed, why don't we just label it a fee and do that? They're talking about doing it with a gas fee instead of a gas tax, because they go to the voters and the voters say no time and time again at the state level. At the local level, they vote for tax increases, but they don't trust state government. And so state government trying to go around it, especially now that there's going to be budget cuts, I think this is essential time to say, look, all you have to do is convince people that that fee or tax is necessary, and people will pass it.
Proof in the pudding was when Governor Hickenlooper wanted this hospital provider tax. And I think he was talking to Colorado Concern. Somebody turned on a recorder, and somebody asked, well, why don't you just bring it to the voters like you do everything? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, we've all seen the same polling. There's no chance it would pass. What the hell does that say that our governor is passing a tax increase that he knows, or soon-to-be senator, I should say, knows is a tax increase, knows the people don't want it. Every poll shows they don't want it, so he does it anyway.
Well, hopefully not future senator, but you look at it and say, yeah, they know this. This is what the legislators are doing at the Capitol, and they know that people won't pass it because they don't trust state government. So they're just going around it and blatantly saying it out loud. But you look at it and say, Jared Polis is somebody who came out right now and said we shouldn't raise taxes. Well, why doesn't that apply to fees too? $100 million or more are big fees. And so we like our chances, given that's the very popular part of Tabor. There's multiple parts of Tabor, and last year we had the Prop CC fight and we're able to win that. But the 70%, 80% of people love the fact that you can vote on tax increases, and I think they're going to see that as a common sense that it should be big fees too.
Problem and the challenge I think you're going to have is that when you bring your proposal as a citizen, you bring it to the title board. People don't know this. It's a three-person panel, and they do their best, and it's tough. Mm-hmm. And they have to describe this in a way. And it comes up with language people might not understand. Fee, enterprise, 100 million. There's a little bit of education that needs to happen. What exactly is an enterprise? Because people hear fees, they get it, but enterprise makes no sense to them.
So an enterprise is a state run business is basically what it's supposed to be. So you talked about the library fees or this kind of thing. The big ones that you could think of are parks. You go in, you give the park some money. The money goes back into that park. Or the park system. Higher education is another enterprise, the lottery. But it's basically supposed to be things that you pay a fee or a surcharge and it goes back into that entity. And so basically what the legislature is, we can make that anything. We can say, well, we'll take gas tax and it goes to transportation or whatever. So they really blew a hole in the original meaning, which was these smaller fees where you're paying $5 or $10 to get a service from the state. And so, there is some education that has to go along with that. We were able to make sure that fees and surcharges were in the language, that the amount of money was in the language, voter approval was in the language, and so it's not the best language you could have, but I think it'll make do.
Let me try this analogy on you. I've used it a few times. I think it works. We haven't received a tax refund, a surplus, since the 2000s, because Referendum C raised our TABOR limit. So this is the way I explain TABOR, which is the government's revenues are in this big whiskey barrel because, it should be a whiskey barrel. And we keep paying taxes. And when we hit our TABOR limit, that is population plus inflation growth from last year, whiskey flows over the sides. We get to have some of that whiskey. It's a refund. But what we didn't realize is that they stuck a spigot on the bottom of the whiskey barrel and they call it fees. And so anytime that it looks like we're going to get to the point where we're going to get some of our overages back, they open this up and they call it the hospital provider fee, or they call it the FASTER fee, or the mill levy freeze, or the growth dividend, or all these things that bring the level back down. When TABOR started, this first barrel, the big barrel, was about 2/3 the size of the fee barrel, the enterprise barrel.
Now it's 1/3.
Now it's completely switched, which means this barrel is smaller than the fees. What people don't get, and here's a real danger you should care about even if you love big government. The smaller barrel now, the direct one, we elect those people. 2/3 of Colorado's budget is being spent by non-elected bureaucrats, appointed people who have no accountability directly to the people. This is taxation without representation because we call it fees.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The 1/3, 2/3, you've moved so much money over to this cash fund enterprise area that it's going up by over $1 billion a year over the last decade, where the general fund might go up $500 million. 2/3 of it is going up on the other side. And so I think you're absolutely right that there's no accountability to this. And it's money that's coming out of our pocket anyway, right? We talk about federal funds and cash funds and the general fund. It's all coming out of our pocket in one way or the other. And all we're saying is people should be able to vote on that. And these big ones and I think it's going to be popular once people understand it.
We had a revolution because we wanted representation over taxation. Now 2/3 of Colorado's budget is not represented directly by voters. I don't care who you are, that should really scare you.
Yeah. And I think you look at it, there's indication even before COVID hit that there was going to be a movement on gas fees, on carbon fees, on family leave. I mean, these are hundreds of millions of dollars in tax increases that they're going to label fees. And so we wanted to jump ahead of that. And it's even more important because the left is going to try to do a $2 billion tax increase on the ballot. It'll lose. And when it does, they're going to be running around looking for more revenue. And it's going to hurt us.
Spend a minute on this one. Yeah. What $2 billion tax increase, which is also trying to get on the ballot?
Yeah, so the left groups, Colorado Fiscal Institute, Bell Policy, et cetera, are trying to raise taxes, which they say on high income people. One, it's a blank check. We don't know where this money's going to go. But they're trying, in a recession, trying to raise $2 billion from Coloradans. And we've seen this in other states. When they raise taxes that way and create a progressive income tax, that people leave the state and they take their revenue with it. And so that's something that I think is just the wrong policy. Even the governor came out and said, we don't need to raise taxes
Hang on. we're now in a recession. There are rich guys who have more money than they need. And so why not do what California does? Why not do what New York does? Illinois is looking at it, and they've already got this ridiculously high tax rate. What's wrong with having rich people pay a little bit more?
Well, I think they're the
Just a little bit
they're the
more.
job creators.
Just a little bit more.
First of all, we have 400,000 unemployed Coloradans right now. They're the job creators. They create a lot of that revenue that comes in. And if they leave the state, if a couple of these wealthy people leave our state and go somewhere else, we're in big trouble because of the amount of money that is raised because of it. And so I think you look at it, progressive income taxes, we've been successful because of Tabor and because of the fact that we have a flat tax. And that's a fair process. It's about a fair tax. Everybody paying the same rate is fair, and it's done really well for us, and our economy's grown. We're number one economy in the country. Why we would want to throw that off? And I think you're going to see revenue decline if this thing happens, not increase. And so you look at it, and you guys, I'm glad you're bringing in the tax cut, because I think that will help give people a choice and say, you know what, in this economic time, do you want a little bit of a tax break or do you want a massive tax increase?
You know, what's great about Colorado law is that, one, we do have a flat tax, which, let me steal credit from my predecessors at Independence. Barry Paulson and John Andrews and others helped folks in the legislature, including Chris Paulson back then, get from a progressive income tax to a flat income tax. When they did it, Barry Paulson, our economist, said if it's going to be revenue neutral, it should be at about 4.5%. So, of course, they made it 5%. Of course. What's a little extra on top? And so Bill Owens wisely brought it down to where it is now, 4.63. We hope to bring it down at the ballot box to 4.55, which is even lower than what the progressive income tax you're talking about is trying to do. Now, I know it. I've seen it so many times. They're going to say, this is a middle-class tax cut, this progressive income tax, because at the lower level, we're going to bring it down. We want to bring it down even more. And we don't mind rich guys keeping some of their own money, too, because they're not going to burn it. They're going to create jobs with it. I've never understood why the left, like the right, loves jobs, but they hate people who create jobs. Right. I've never quite understood it. So Tabor protects the right to vote, protects spending without it going too much, and we have a flat tax. These are the two pillars that I think can keep Colorado strong during this pandemic.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And what I wrote something in the Denver Post recently talking about the fact.
Oh, do you write for the Denver Post?
I don't.
What's
Occasionally.
What's that like?
Just occasionally. Not like you used to. But but what I was talking about was how we bounced back from the last recession. And oil and gas has been a huge boost to our economy over the last decade. But also Tabor allowed us to vote on tax increases that the governor supported, Governor Hickenlooper at the time. The legislature was pushing at times when we didn't have a majority in either House or the Senate. They pushed for tax increases that would have passed, and we were able to stop those. And so tax policy kept us, we went from, probably eighth or so in the country to first over that period of time. And, the liberals should love this. The tax revenue went up too. We were the number 2 in terms of growth of our state budget since the last recession. And so you look at it and saying these policies worked, and why we're going after agriculture and oil and gas and everything else right now, it's going to be a big problem, and we're not going to bounce back the same way. And so I'm really fearful of what the legislature wants to do, is going to try to do, what they already started doing, and it's going to make it that much worse now that COVID hit.
It's hard for folks to understand that when you reduce taxes, you sometimes, quite often, make more in tax revenue. Why?
Well, I think because you have more economic activity. One, but two, the reason it matters on the state level, especially, is because people can move with their feet, right? They say, if taxes, no income tax in one state, or there's a flat one here, they make decisions like that. They might bring their business. They might individually decide to live in a certain place, and so there's no doubt that on the state level, especially, a lot of times, I would say we are going to have more economic activity and more revenue if we pass the tax cut than if we pass the tax increase, and really go after these higher income workers and small businesses. They said, well, this isn't going to this is only going to impact 20% of small businesses. So there's 400,000 people that are out of work. 20% of the small businesses are going to get a hit. That is horrible. So I don't think they're really thinking it through with a strong, economic base. But there's no doubt that we have a roadmap from the last recession, and we should follow it.
It's a great way to put it. Forget that high tax states like Illinois are actually seeing people leave, a net migration.
100,000 a year right now are leaving Illinois.
One every 5 minutes is leaving Illinois when the rest of the country is exploding in population. Same thing in New York, California, and they're coming to places like Colorado, one, because it's beautiful and there's skiing and there's weed and craft beer and all the rest. But when it comes to building a business, where are they going? They're going to Texas. They're going to Wyoming.
Utah.
They're going to Utah. They're going to Florida. No income tax. We live in a world where states have to compete for these job producers.
And I do think, you can criticize the governor for a lot of things, but I think he gets that point, right? That he's been talking about a tax cut for a while, knowing that it does actually have real world consequences if you raise taxes or if you lower them. He's also, tweeting at different businesses to come here if you don't like your state. So you can give him credit in that area because he understands basic economics. And I think that's something that a lot of the Democrats in the state don't.
The governor, when he was running, said he wanted a flat tax cut. Mm-hmm. He didn't say he wanted a middle class tax cut. He said he wanted a flat tax cut. I'm only his little foot soldier. I'm only trying to give him what he wants by doing this. There's going to be a massive budget shortfall this year, and in the world of budgetary predictions, pandemic was not really on the list. What should the legislature do? There's going to be perhaps a $3 billion hole out of their $30 billion budget.
Well, one, I think that is still in the future. They have to deal with setting a budget now, but I want to see things open up even quicker than they are now. We're a little bit faster than some of these other states that have Democratic governors, but we need to get moving a lot quicker to make that budget shortfall a lot less. I think that's step number one: is open up. Let's get people moving. The whole idea was to make sure that hospitals.
You want to kill people.
That hospitals weren't overrun. We haven't gotten over a third of ICU beds filled. We haven't used the hospitals they set up.
Have you noticed that the narrative changed really fast? Yeah. Which was flatten the curve, flatten the curve, flatten the curve. We won't have enough hospital beds, enough ventilators. Well, success, mission accomplished, curve flattened. You said we're only using a third of the capacity. Now it's time to open up, and now it's complete and total safety, which is
and I believe we should have social distancing. We should make sure that we're adapting to the environment, and it is a very scary sickness for a lot of people, and it's horrible. But when you look at it, if the vaccine's a year or two away, we still have to get moving because there's suicides, there's poverty. I mean, people will die because of the economic circumstances. And so we have to do it smart, but we have to open up. And so we have to close that budget shortfall there. But I think you're going to have across the board cuts to a lot of things. But this is when you have the discussion about in education, for example, which I know pretty well. Only 56% of the money is getting into the classroom, getting the teachers. This is the time when you say, okay, we're going to cut administrative fat and make sure teachers are taken care of. We're not balancing the budgets on the backs of students in higher education, et cetera. And some of that money, the CARES money, is going to go to schools that the governor just announced. But I think when you look at it, this is the interesting thing is you have Democrats who don't want any input from any Republican or any conservative ever on when to open, when to close, when session starts, any bill. And then when budget cuts come up, they're like, where's your plan? Right? And they're running around and be like, you guys need to go say your plan. And I think, the Republicans have put out some stuff that they, want to look at in terms of cuts. I think that's smart to do and to say this is where you can look. But the key is how do we get the economy going back? Because, the revenue, we know the revenue can come in if we get the economy back.
Let me say some good things about Polis. I wouldn't want to be in his position because I believe he understands what you've just said. I think he might even agree with it. He understands the economic driver. But his caucus, his constituency, are socialist-leaning people who want complete safety all the time from money that's being made out of thin air. Mm-hmm. And this concerns me so much on the federal level, just printing up of we're printing cash out of nowhere. Right. I think this is going to cost more lives in the long run. So I wouldn't want to be in his situation here, but I want to say a lot of the stuff he's done, I'm gonna support. A lot of the temporary stuff he should make permanent. The fact that healthcare workers,
regulations,
cut the regulations so that they can work during the emergency. Well, they should be able to work all the time. If you want to get the engine going, you cut the regulatory hurdles.
Yeah, and I think we have to do that. But the funny thing is you have these people who shut down the economy to help save lives, they say, and then are very upset about budget cuts, like we all are. But you see in California, for example, they said, first responders are going to be the first ones to take the cuts. And people are like, what about the bullet train that costs billions of dollars? And in every state you have those things where you say, you know what, they're going to throw out teachers there to start with. Well, what about administrators? What about the growth in the bureaucracy that we have?
They call it the Washington Monument Gambit, which is you crush the thing that people see and identify with. Oh my God, we're going to cut schools. Wait a minute. What about midnight basketball? What are we going to cut?
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, we have to make these cuts, and it's going to be hurtful for a while. We have to make efficiencies and stuff, but how quickly can we bounce back? This is a long-term discussion, and the fear that I have is this is going to be, if we put the wrong policies in place, if we pass family leave, if we pass a tax increase, if we go after oil and gas, we won't have that recovery, and that revenue shortfall is going to be there for a long time, or our state's going to start losing more jobs.
We're destroying oil and gas. Senate Bill 181 is and then the pandemic then destroyed it even more. So yes. we're killing one of our number one drivers. Then we killed tourism. I mean, we're going to have a summer potentially without a concert, without a festival, without a bike tournament, without any of these things that are economic massive drivers for the state. So we're crippling our ability to go forward. When I teased about Senator Hickenlooper, how does this play out, do you think, in the fall? On that race particular?
I think we don't know. It's so early. You look at the changes in politics. I mean, 2 months ago, Donald Trump was a shoo-in to win. Corey was looking good. It was going to be Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket. I mean, how quickly things can change. I think a lot of it has to do with what happens with the economy for the rest of the year. John Hickenlooper had his first, debate with Andrew Romanoff, and it was just horrible. I mean, he did a horrible job on it. And so I think there's a lot of weakness there. I think, you look at the mood in Colorado. I think it definitely, favors what happened in 2018. Was horrible for Republicans. And so I think, he has a natural advantage by just demographics and everything else that's going on. But once you get into debates, once you see what's happening in the economy, Corey's very likable. He is somebody who has done a lot of good work during this time to get ventilators here, to get masks, to get testing. Hickenlooper doesn't have leadership. That's one thing that think about Hickenlooper in the midst of this pandemic and it would have been that much more worse for Colorado.
I was talking to Ted Trimpa here last week, and I made the comment. Most Republicans, most conservatives want to see Andrew Romanoff win this nomination because they think he'd be easier to beat. No. I think it's quite the opposite, because Hick is a gift that just keeps giving. Although he's a lucky man, a pandemic keeps him bottled up and not saying things like...
And Romanoff doesn't have a chance because of the pandemic. Right. I mean, in his primary. But I agree with you. I would rather, if I'm Corey, I'd rather face Hickenlooper than somebody who doesn't want to run, who says he's not cut out to be a senator, who's really showed no leadership as governor. And when he did, the voters shot down the tax increases he wanted.
It's media's job to protect him.
That's what he said.
Hey, people want to help out, want to help you get this thing on the ballot. Where do they go? Where's some good...
So Colorado Rising State Action.com is our website. But
rolls right off the tongue. Colorado...
It's not quite like II or whatever, I2I like you guys have. But Colorado Rising State Action, we're all over social media, and we want to get both of these ballot issues on to give people a clear choice. It's an offensive measure, right? We're always on defense. We're always defending the stuff that they're trying to do. This is one where we can go on the offensive.
And for me, if the progressives are going to put on this massive tax increase, well, then we ought to offer a tiny little tax decrease and let people decide. That's what beauty. Michael Fields, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.